The Mazda MX-5 is a convertible icon, but after more than 2 decades on sale, people looking for open-air motoring might be in the market for something with a difference. So we've assembled 2 MX-5s with a twist. On one side of this contest we have the Abarth 124 Spider, and on the other the MX-5 Roadster's new hardtop sibling, the MX-5 RF. The Abarth is a result of a partnership between the two companies that sees the Japanese brand build the Italian machines alongside the MX-5. But in order to differentiate the two, Abarth has equipped the 124 Spider with its own engine and gearbox. The 1.4 litre turbocharged petrol engine is good for 125 kilowatts of power and 250 Nm of torque. The Italian brand has also completely restyled the exterior of the car, ditching the edgy style of the MX-5 for a more retro look. But while the outside is very different, as soon as you hop in the Abarth, it's very Mazda. The interior is basically a direct copy from the MX-5 right down to the infotainment system. Really only the badge and a couple of the graphics on the dials here are different. What you do notice straight away though is the engine. The soundtrack is totally different from the MX-5. It's a raspy little 1.4 that sort of barks and pops and crackles like you expect from a turbocharged motor. It's maybe not the best soundtrack I've ever heard though. It's a little flat in places, you know, maybe a little too gruff, but it does imbue the Abarth with its own character. I mean, it is the biggest difference really. Aside from the looks, this is what really makes the Abarth an Italian car rather than just a rebadged MX-5. It's got so much more torque than the MX-5, you know, which is really, you know, a big part of the character of the MX-5 is the fact that you've really got to work the engine and gearbox to have some fun with it, and that's part of its charm. This though is a very different proposition. You can leave it in taller gears and just trust that the torque will pull you out. But also, it just goes faster, you know. More grunt means more go. So it actually feels a lot zippier. But there is actually more to it than that too. The suspension is actually a bit firmer in the Abarth. The MX-5 is different from pretty much any other sports car on the road because it's actually set up quite soft. The suspension sort of rolls and squats in the corners. You do get a little sense of that. There's still a degree of it in the Abarth, but it's noticeably firmer and therefore just feels a little bit more direct and I guess a little bit more like a traditional sports car. But that's not to say it's better, or that's just different. One of the big similarities is the roof. It's still got the fully manual Mazda roof. Ultimately, while the Abarth shares a lot of its DNA with the MX-5, they've actually made something different. You know, this really is not a rebadged car. By putting their own engine in it, giving it its own style, giving it its own driving character, they've created something that's similar but different, and it is unique. It is quintessentially an Abarth, not a Mazda in disguise. The RF stands for Retractable Fastback, Mazda's way of describing its unique hardtop solution. The RF's clever little roof was born out of necessity, but also a desire to do things a little differently this time around with this generation MX-5. The necessity is they physically can't fit the whole roof mechanism and the pieces in the boot of the car because this 4th generation is so small. But by keeping the flying buttress behind me, it actually gives the RF, you know, a unique look that makes it feel a bit special and unlike anything else really on the road. But because it brings extra weight, which was the enemy of the MX-5 designers, they've taken a slightly different tact with this car. They've made it a more premium, more luxurious model. This isn't just an MX-5 with a folding top. Put the roof up and it actually feels like an MX-5 coupe. It's actually quite well insulated inside. It feels quite comfortable and quite grown up really for a little car. It still feels light. It still feels agile. it still feels lots of fun to drive. Because it's strictly a 2-litre engine lineup, you know, it's got decent poke. The 6-speed manual transmission is a gem. This is a really fun, engaging car to drive. Just like you expect with an MX-5. They haven't messed with that winning formula. One problem with the roof is that it can only be operated at up to 10 kilometers an hour, which effectively means you've got to be standing still. Mazda say they've done it for safety, but really when the soft top you can do by yourself manually, which isn't as simple as just flicking a switch, it's a little bit of a frustration. One thing to make clear though is this is not a target top, even though it looks like one from the outside, because there's no glass between the front seats, so you still get the airflow coming back through into the cabin, which is just a classic part of convertible driving. So you feel a little bit more exposed to the elements, which is, you know, part of the fun.
Trying to decide which one of these two cars is best is a tricky proposition, because despite all their common parts, they're actually two very different cars once you get behind the wheel. The Abarth may be based on the MX-5, but its unique engine, styling and tweak suspension give it a character of its own. The MX-5 RF, on the other hand, has its own unique character too. When compared to its soft-top sibling, it's a more refined and mature machine, which makes it an easier car to live with, but at the expense of the purity of the Roadster. So the real winner here are those looking for a compact convertible for some open-air thrills, because now there is more choice than ever before.